The scream of her oven timer made Willa Richardson drop the piping bag, sending a spiral of buttercream across her workstation just as two small faces pressed against the bakery's front window. She'd seen hungry kids before, plenty of them in this neighborhood where gentrification hadn't quite reached, but these two were different. Pale as moonlight even in the dull gray afternoon, with white blonde hair that seemed to glow and eyes too large for their thin faces. They couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, and they stared at the cinnamon rolls in her display case like they were looking at salvation itself. Willa's heart clenched. She knew that look, had worn it herself as a child when her mother worked 3 jobs and dinner was whatever the food bank had that week. Before she could think twice, she was at the door, pushing it open despite the closed sign she'd hung up 10 minutes ago. "Hey there," she said softly, crouching down to their level. The October wind cut through her flour-dusted apron, but the children wore only thin clothes that looked expensive but impractical. "Are you two hungry?" The girl, slightly taller than the boy, regarded her with unsettling intensity. "We shouldn't accept charity from strangers." Her voice was oddly formal, accented in a way Willa couldn't place. European, maybe? The boy beside her swayed slightly, and Willa noticed how his lips had a faint blue tinge. "It's not charity if you come inside and keep me company while I clean up," Willa said firmly. "I hate being alone in here after closing. Makes me nervous. You'd actually be doing me a favor." It was a transparent lie, but the children were clearly desperate enough not to care. They exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them, before the girl nodded and they stepped inside. The warmth of the bakery seemed to hit them like a physical force. The boy made a small sound of relief, and the girl's rigid posture softened just slightly. Up close, Willa could see they were twins, identical except for the length of their hair. The girl's fell past her shoulders in a silken curtain, while the boy's was cropped short. "I'm Willa," she said, guiding them to one of the small tables by the window. "What are your names?" "I'm Serafina," the girl said after a pause. "This is my brother, Sebastian." "Those are beautiful names." Willa hurried behind the counter, grabbing 2 of the cinnamon rolls that had been her experimental batch, too generous with the icing to sell, but perfect for hungry children. She added 2 cups of hot chocolate, extra whipped cream, and brought the whole tray over. "Here you go. Eat up." Serafina looked at the food like it might disappear if she blinked. "We don't have money." "Did I ask for money?" Willa settled into the chair across from them, resting her chin on her hand. "I told you, you're doing me a favor. Now eat before it gets cold." The children fell on the food with a desperation that made Willa's chest ache. They ate quickly but with surprising delicacy. No crumbs dropped, no mess made. When Sebastian reached for his hot chocolate, she noticed his hands were trembling. "When was the last time you two ate?" she asked gently. Serafina's eyes flickered up, guarded. "This morning." It was clearly a lie, but Willa didn't push. "Where are your parents?" "Our father's working," Serafina said. "He works very long hours." "And your mother?" Something shuddered in the girl's expression. "We don't have a mother." The boy, Sebastian, had chocolate on his upper lip. He looked marginally less corpse-like now, some color returning to his face. "Father says we must never speak of her." "Seb," Serafina hissed, but her brother just shrugged, licking frosting from his fingers. Willa filed that information away with growing concern. 2 children, clearly neglected, wandering the streets at closing time on a school night. She should probably call child services, but something held her back. Maybe it was the way they held themselves, that strange formality that spoke of training rather than innocence. Or maybe it was the desperate protectiveness in Serafina's eyes whenever she looked at her brother. "Well, if your father's working late, maybe you two should stay here a bit longer," Willa said, standing up. "I've got to finish decorating a wedding cake and I could use some opinions. Think you can help?" The transformation was immediate. Sebastian's entire face lit up, and even Serafina's careful mask cracked to reveal something young and eager underneath. "Truly?" Sebastian breathed. "Truly. Come on, you can sit on the tall stools and watch. I'll even let you taste test the decorations." For the next 2 hours, Willa worked on her most important commission of the month, while 2 small vampires, though she didn't know that yet, watched with rapt attention. She let them try bits of fondant, showed them how to pipe roses, and listened as they slowly, gradually opened up. She learned that they'd moved to the city recently, that they lived in the old estate on Ashford Hill, that their father was very important, but very busy. She learned that Sebastian loved stories and Serafina was protective to a fault. She learned that they'd never been in a bakery before, never eaten cinnamon rolls, never had hot chocolate with whipped cream. What kind of father keeps his children so sheltered, she thought, but didn't say. We should go, Serafina said eventually, as the clock struck 8. Father will worry. Does he have a phone? Willa asked. You could call him. He doesn't carry one while working. Serafina slid off her stool, immediately helping Sebastian down. Thank you for the food, Miss Willa. You've been very kind. Wait, Willa grabbed a box, quickly filling it with various pastries, some cookies, a few slices of cake. Take this, and here. She scribbled her number on the lid. If you two are ever hungry or need anything, you call me, okay? Serafina took the box carefully, holding it like treasure. For a moment, her composed expression cracked entirely, and she looked like what she was, a frightened child trying to hold her world together. Thank you, she whispered. Willa watched them disappear into the darkness, two pale figures swallowed by shadows, and felt a profound unease settle in her stomach. She should have insisted on calling their father, should have at least offered to drive them home. The Ashford Hill estate was miles away, through some of the city's worst neighborhoods, but they'd seemed so certain, so determined, and she'd let them go. That night, lying in her cramped apartment above the bakery, Willa couldn't sleep. She kept seeing those two pale faces, those hungry eyes, kept wondering what kind of life those children led in their isolated estate with their absent father. She didn't know that at that very moment, in a mansion built during the Civil War and hidden behind walls most humans couldn't even see, those same children were being held by their father as he listened to their breathless account of the baker who'd fed them, who'd been kind when they'd expected rejection, who'd given them the first genuine warmth they'd felt since their mother's death 3 years ago. She didn't know that Casimir Nightwell, the vampire king of the Eastern Territories, ancient and powerful and terrifying to most who knew his name, was crying silent tears into his children's hair as he realized how badly he'd failed them in his grief. And she certainly didn't know that he would be standing in her bakery the next evening, determined to thank the woman who'd shown his children such unexpected kindness. The next day was a blur of orders. Willa's bakery, Sweet Haven, wasn't fancy, but it had a reputation for quality that kept her busy. She'd just finished boxing up 3 dozen cupcakes for a corporate event when the door chimed, and he walked in. The man was impossible not to notice. Tall, easily over 6 feet, with that same striking white blonde hair as the children, though his was longer, pulled back in a way that should have looked pretentious, but instead looked regal. His skin was pale as marble, his features sharp and aristocratic, and he wore a black suit that probably cost more than her entire month's rent, but it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Dark as midnight, ancient and sad and powerful all at once. Miss Richardson. His voice was deep, accented like the children's, and there was something in it that made her spine straighten involuntarily. That's me. She wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly very aware of the flour in her hair and the chocolate stain on her jeans. Can I help you? I'm Casimir Nightwell. He moved closer to the counter with a grace that seemed inhuman. I believe you met my children yesterday, Serafina and Sebastian. Relief flooded through her. Oh, thank God, I've been worried about them all day. Are they okay? Something flickered in his expression, there and gone too quickly to identify. They're well. Better than they've been in some time, actually, thanks to your kindness. He paused, and she got the sense he was choosing his words carefully. They told me what you did. Feeding them, letting them stay, sending them home with enough food for days. I came to repay you. There's nothing to repay, Willa said automatically. They were hungry. I fed them. Anyone would have done the same. No, Casimir said softly. They wouldn't have. My children are different. People sense it. Even if they don't understand why. Most cross the street to avoid them. You invited them inside. Willa felt heat rise in her cheeks. They're kids. Sweet kids who were clearly starving. What kind of monster would I be if I'd turned them away? For a long moment, Casimir just looked at her. Really looked, in a way that made her feel exposed, like he could see past her defenses to everything she tried to hide. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the determination that kept her standing even when she wanted to collapse. "May I be frank with you, Miss Richardson?" "Willa," she corrected, "and yes, I've been failing my children." The admission seemed to cost him. "Their mother died 3 years ago, and I've been so lost in my grief that I've neglected their most basic needs. Yesterday was the first time they've laughed, truly laughed, in months. You did that in 2 hours. You gave them something I've been unable to provide." Oh no. Willa's heart, her stupid, too soft heart, cracked right open. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd imagined having to confront a neglectful parent, maybe threaten to call child services. She hadn't expected this raw honesty, this obvious pain. "Mr. Nightwell. Casimir, please. Casimir." The name felt strange on her tongue, old-fashioned and formal. "I'm sorry about your wife. That must have been devastating. But those kids adore you. Sebastian talked about you like you hung the moon." Something in his expression softened. "Did he?" "Constantly. Father says this. Father taught us that. They're not neglected. Not really. They're just sad and lonely, and maybe a little bit hungry." Casimir's jaw tightened. "The hunger is inexcusable. I should have noticed. I should have." He trailed off, then seemed to collect himself. "I want to hire you." Willa blinked. "What?" "To cook for my children, to spend time with them, to provide what I clearly cannot." He pulled out a checkbook, and Willa's eyes widened at the amount he wrote. "This is for 1 month. If the arrangement works, we can discuss a more permanent solution." The check had so many zeros that Willa's brain momentarily short-circuited. This was more than she made in 6 months at the bakery. This was life-changing money. This was pay off her debts and finally fix the broken oven money. But something made her hesitate. "Why me?" "Because my children trust you. Because you saw them at their worst and didn't flinch. Because—" He paused, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. "Because I think you might be exactly what our family needs." There were 1,000 reasons to say no. He was clearly wealthy, probably dangerous in ways she didn't understand, and the whole situation screamed red flags. But then she remembered Serafina's face when she'd smiled, really smiled, at the chocolate roses Willa had piped. Remembered Sebastian's delighted laugh when she'd let him lick the spoon. "I need to keep the bakery running," she said slowly. "It's my business, my dream. I can't give that up. I wouldn't ask you to. Come in the evenings after you close. Stay for dinner. Spend time with the children. A few hours, 3 or 4 nights a week. That's all I'm asking." It was too much money for so little work. But looking at this man, at the desperation carefully hidden behind aristocratic composure, Willa understood. He wasn't really hiring a cook or a nanny. He was hiring hope. "Okay," she said, "but I'm not taking that much. Half, and I get to teach the kids to bake if they want to learn." Casimir's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Done." They shook hands, and Willa tried not to notice how cold his skin was, how his touch sent electricity racing up her arm. She told herself it meant nothing, that this was just a job, just a way to help 2 kids who needed her. She told herself a lot of lies that afternoon. The Ashford Hill estate was not what Willa expected. She'd imagined something Gothic, maybe a bit run down. Instead, the mansion was immaculate, a sprawling structure of stone and iron that seemed to absorb the twilight rather than reflect it. The gates opened before she could knock, swinging inward on silent hinges. Casimir met her at the door. He'd traded his suit for more casual clothes, though his idea of casual still included a black button-down that probably cost more than her car. "Willa, thank you for coming. Thanks for the very detailed directions." She hefted her bags of groceries. "Though I have to say, I don't know many people who include turn left at the oak tree that was struck by lightning as a landmark." Was that amusement in his eyes? "The estate is old. We have our peculiarities." He led her inside, and Willa tried not to gape. The foyer alone was larger than her entire apartment, all dark wood and Victorian elegance. But there were signs of life, too. Children's books stacked on a side table, a forgotten stuffed bear on the stairs, drawings pinned to what looked like a very expensive antique mirror. "The kitchen is this way." Casimir guided her down a hallway lined with portraits. Willa noticed that all the painted figures had that same pale hair, those same dark eyes. Family resemblance, clearly. I should warn you, the children have been waiting by the window since noon. They're quite excited. As if summoned, two small bodies came racing around the corner. Miss Willa! Sebastian crashed into her legs with enough force to make her stagger. Serafina was more composed, but the joy on her face was unmistakable. You came, Sebastian said, looking up at her with those two large eyes. Father said you would, but I was afraid you'd forgotten us. Willa crouched down, setting her bags aside to hug them both properly. Forget you? Impossible. I've been thinking about you two all day. She pulled back, examining them critically. They looked better than they had in the bakery, more color in their cheeks, but still far too thin. How are you feeling? Much better, Serafina said. Father made sure we ate breakfast and lunch. Good. Willa straightened, giving Casimir an approving nod. Then you're ready to help me make dinner. I hope you two like lasagna. The kitchen was a dream, all marble counters and top-of-the-line appliances. Willa set the children to work immediately, giving them simple tasks while she handled the more complex preparation. They were eager students, listening intently to her instructions, asking thoughtful questions. Casimir lingered in the doorway, watching. Willa was acutely aware of his presence, of those dark eyes following her movements. It should have made her nervous, but instead she felt oddly safe, like he was standing guard rather than observing. You can help too, you know, she called to him. I don't bite. The children giggled at that, some private joke she didn't understand. Casimir moved into the kitchen with that same preternatural grace. What would you have me do? Chop these vegetables. She handed him a cutting board and knife, then turned back to browning the meat. Tell me about yourself. The kids mentioned you have an important job, but they were vague on details. I manage the family business, Casimir said, which was technically true if you considered ruling a vampire territory a business. A lot of politics, unfortunately. Tedious meetings with tedious people. Sounds exhausting. It can be. He worked quickly, his knife skills far too good for someone who claimed to be out of practice. And you? How long have you had the bakery? 3 years. Opened it right after culinary school. Willa smiled, remembering those early days of terror and excitement. Everyone said I was crazy, opening a business that young in that neighborhood. But I wanted to create something, you know? A place that felt like home, where people could come and feel safe and cared for, even if just for a few minutes. That's a beautiful philosophy. It's a practical one. I grew up poor. I know what it's like to be hungry, to feel invisible. If I can make someone's day a little better with a cookie or a kind word, why wouldn't I? Casimir paused in his chopping, looking at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You're remarkable. Willa laughed, uncomfortable with the praise. I'm really not. I'm just a baker who's too soft-hearted for her own good. Father, Serafina interrupted, I told you she was special. The girl said it with such conviction that Willa felt heat flood her face. I'm just nice. There's a difference. But as the evening progressed, as they cooked and ate together around the massive dining table, Willa began to understand what Serafina meant. This family was starving, not for food, but for connection, for normalcy, for someone who didn't treat them like they were dangerous or strange. She told stories about the bakery, about her regular customers and their quirks. The children laughed, really laughed, at her imitation of Mrs. Chen, who always ordered exactly 3 cream puffs and insisted on inspecting each one before accepting. Casimir smiled more than she'd thought possible, the sadness in his eyes receding. After dinner, they moved to what Casimir called the family room, though it was large enough to be a ballroom. Sebastian immediately climbed into Willa's lap, startling her with his boldness. Serafina settled beside them, leaning against Willa's shoulder. Will you tell us a story? Sebastian asked, a real one from when you were little. So Willa told them about growing up in foster care, sanitizing the worst parts, but keeping it honest. She told them about the foster mother who taught her to bake, who showed her that food could be love made tangible, about saving every penny to go to culinary school, about the terror and joy of opening Sweet Haven's doors for the first time. The children listened raptly. And Casimir watched her like she was something precious and impossible, something he was afraid might disappear if he looked away. When it was time to leave, the children clung to her, making her promise to come back soon. Tomorrow? Sebastian pleaded. I can't tomorrow, sweetie. I have to work, but Friday? Friday, Serafina agreed, like they were signing a treaty. Casimir walked her to her car. The night was cold, frost already forming on the grass, but he didn't seem to notice despite wearing only his shirt. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Today was the first time I've heard Sebastian laugh since his mother died. You've given us a gift." "They're easy to love," Willa said, and meant it. "Nevertheless," he hesitated, then added, "would you have dinner with me? Just the two of us. I'd like to discuss, that is, I think we should talk about the arrangement. Make sure you're comfortable with everything." It wasn't a date, Willa told herself firmly. It was a business meeting. Never mind that her heart had started racing, or that she couldn't stop noticing how beautiful he was in the moonlight, pale and ethereal and utterly captivating. "Sure," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "When?" "Saturday night? I'll pick you up at 8. Willa drove home in a daze, her mind whirling. This was just a job, just a way to help two kids. The fact that their father was gorgeous and sad and made her want to do dangerous things like comfort him, like touch him, like figure out what it would take to make him really smile, was irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. She was still telling herself that when Saturday arrived. Casimir picked her up in a car that was probably worth more than her entire life, a sleek black thing that purred like a contented cat. He held the door for her, and Willa tried not to notice how his hand lingered at the small of her back as he guided her inside. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere quiet, where we can talk." The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu, the kind where the waiters spoke in hushed, reverent tones. Willa felt underdressed despite the nicest outfit she owned, a dark green dress that hugged her curves in ways that usually made her self-conscious. But Casimir looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "You're staring," she said, trying for lightness. "Apologies. It's just—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You look lovely. The green suits you." "Thanks." She fidgeted with her napkin. "You clean up pretty well yourself." That almost smile again. "I try." They ordered, and Willa let Casimir guide her through the wine list. When the appetizers arrived, he asked her about the bakery, about her dreams for the future, about what made her happy. He listened like every word mattered, like he was cataloging each detail to examine later. "Your turn," Willa said eventually. "Tell me about you. The real story, not the sanitized version." Casimir's expression shuddered slightly. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with your wife. What was she like?" For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "Isolde was fierce, beautiful and brilliant and completely unafraid of anything." His voice was soft with memory. "We had a complicated beginning, but by the end, I loved her more than I thought possible. When she died giving birth to the twins, I thought I'd die too. Wanted to, honestly. The only thing that kept me going was them, but I've been so lost in my grief that I've failed them in every way that matters." "You haven't failed them," Willa said firmly. "You're still here. You're still trying. That counts for something." "Does it?" He met her eyes, and the pain there was staggering. "I'm their father. I should be able to provide for them, protect them, give them everything they need. Instead, I let them wander the streets, starving, until a stranger took pity on them. They weren't starving. They were just hungry. There's a difference." Willa reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. His skin was cold, but she didn't pull away. "And maybe they didn't need a stranger's pity. Maybe they needed a reminder that the world can be kind, that people can be trusted. You can't teach them that from inside your grief." Casimir turned his hand over, lacing their fingers together. "When did you become so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just a woman who's been through some things and came out the other side." She squeezed his hand. "You're going to be okay, all of you. I can feel it." They talked for hours, long after their plates were cleared. Casimir told her about his childhood, about growing up in a family with impossible expectations, about the weight of responsibility he'd carried since he was younger than his children were now. He didn't mention vampires, didn't reveal the truth of what he was, but he gave her enough honesty that Willa felt privileged to receive it. She told him about the darker parts of her past, about the foster homes that were less kind, about learning to make herself small and quiet to avoid attention, about the day she aged out of the system with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a stubborn refusal to give up. "You're a survivor," Casimir said, admiration clear in his voice. "So are you." When he drove her home, the silence was comfortable. He walked her to her door, the October chill making her shiver. Without a word, Casimir shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled like him, something dark and spiced that made her want to bury her face in the fabric. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "I can't remember the last time I felt this human." "You're welcome." Willa looked up at him, at those dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries, and made a reckless decision. Standing on her toes, she pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Casimir." She was inside before she could see his reaction, her heart pounding. Through the window, she watched him stand there for a long moment, one hand pressed to his cheek, before he finally turned and walked back to his car. Willa touched her lips, already knowing she was in trouble. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Willa would close the bakery, drive to the estate, and spend the evening with the children. Sometimes Casimir was there. Sometimes his mysterious work kept him away. But the kids were always waiting for her, always eager and affectionate. She taught them to make cookies, let them lick the beaters when the batter was safe to eat, showed them how to knead bread, the rhythm of it meditative and soothing. Read them stories curled up on the huge sofa in the family room, Sebastian on one side and Serafina on the other. And slowly, she began to notice things. The children never ate in front of her, not really. They'd taste things, make appreciative noises, but she never saw them actually swallow. The house was always cold, but none of them seemed to notice. There were no mirrors on the walls, no photographs, nothing that would show a reflection. Casimir never came to the bakery during the day, never met her before sunset. And his skin, God, his skin was always so pale and cold, like touching marble. Willa told herself she was imagining things, that there were logical explanations. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she'd remember stories her foster sister used to tell. Old stories about creatures that walked in the night, that drank blood to survive, that never aged and never died. Vampires. It was ridiculous, impossible. Vampires were fiction, stories meant to frighten children, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something obvious, some truth hiding just beneath the surface. The realization came, ironically, because of garlic. She was making garlic bread, part of the Italian feast she'd planned for dinner, when Sebastian came into the kitchen. He took one breath of the air and immediately backed away, his face twisting. "Sebastian!" Willa set down her knife, concerned. "Are you okay?" "The smell," he said, his voice strained. "It burns." "It's just garlic, sweetie." But Serafina was there now, pulling her brother back, her face carefully blank. "He's allergic. Very allergic. We should have mentioned it." "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Willa immediately moved to the sink, washing her hands thoroughly. "I'll throw this out. I should have asked about allergies. That was careless of me." "It's fine," Serafina said, but her eyes were wary now, calculating. "We'll just wait in the other room." The children disappeared and Willa stood in the kitchen, her mind racing. Allergic to garlic, cold skin, no reflections, never eating normal food, never appearing in daylight. Oh no. She should have been terrified, should have run screaming from the house and never looked back. But instead, Willa felt a strange calm settle over her, because it made sense now, all the pieces clicking into place. And more importantly, it didn't change what mattered. Those children needed her. That sad, beautiful man needed her. And God help her, she needed them too. She found Casimir in his study, surrounded by old books and papers written in languages she didn't recognize. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the exact moment he realized something had changed. "You know," he said quietly. Not a question. "You're a vampire." She said it baldly, no room for deflection. "You and the children, that's why they don't eat, why you're all so pale, why you never come out during the day." Casimir stood, moving around the desk with that inhuman grace. "Yes." "Are you going to kill me?" "What?" "No." He looked genuinely horrified. "Willa, I would never, none of us would ever hurt you." "But you drink blood." "Yes, but only from those who consent, or from blood banks. We're not monsters." He paused. "Well, we are monsters, but we're not murderers." Willa laughed, slightly hysterical. "I'm standing in a vampire's house discussing ethics. My life has gotten really weird." You're taking this remarkably well. Am I? Because I feel like I'm about to pass out. She sank into one of his chairs, trying to process everything. How old are you? Old enough that the specific number is depressing. And the kids? They're what we call daywalkers, half vampire, half human. Their mother was human. His expression softened with grief. They need regular food as well as blood, but I've been so focused on the blood part that I neglected their human needs. That's why they were so hungry when you found them. You're the vampire king. It made sense now, the way he'd said he was important, the portraits of pale ancestors, the estate hidden from human eyes. That's why you're so busy. Of the Eastern Territories, yes. It's a position I inherited and can't abdicate, no matter how much I might wish to. He knelt in front of her chair, looking up at her with those ancient eyes. I should have told you from the beginning. But I was afraid. Humans who learn our secret rarely react well. And you were so good with the children, so perfect for them. I couldn't bear to lose you. Willa reached out, touching his face. His skin was cool under her palm, but not unpleasant. I'm not going anywhere. You should run from this place and never look back. We're dangerous, Willa, even when we don't mean to be. Those kids are about as dangerous as puppies, and you... She studied his face, seeing the fear there, the desperate hope he was trying to hide. You're just a dad who's doing his best in an impossible situation. Vampire or not, that doesn't change. How can you be so accepting of this? Because I've spent weeks getting to know you, all of you, and the only thing that's changed is now I understand why you're all so weird about food. She smiled, trying to lighten the moment. Though I have questions? So many questions? Casimir laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. I'll answer whatever you want to know. They talked until dawn approached, Casimir explaining the intricacies of vampire society, the politics and power structures, the rules and restrictions. He told her about the children, about how rare daywalkers were, how precious and protected, about how their mother had been killed by vampire hunters who'd seen the twins as abominations. I couldn't save her, he said, voice rough with old pain. I was too late. I held her as she died, and she made me promise to protect them, to love them enough for both of us. And I've been failing that promise every day since. You haven't failed, Willa insisted. You've just been grieving. But Casimir, those kids are growing up. They need you present, not perfect. And what if I don't know how to be present? Then you learn. We'll figure it out together. He looked at her like she'd offered him the world. Together? If you want me to stay. Knowing what you are, what they are, if you still want me around. Casimir reached for her, pulling her close in a hug that felt like desperation and relief combined. I want you around more than I've wanted anything in centuries. But Willa, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. The vampire world is dangerous. There are those who would hurt you just to hurt me. And I'm not good at relationships. I'm controlling and overprotective, and I have centuries of baggage. Well, I'm stubborn and independent, and I have abandonment issues. So I guess we're both a mess. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But I'm willing to try if you are. You're certain? Instead of answering, Willa kissed him. Really kissed him this time, not the chaste peck she'd given him weeks ago. His lips were cool against hers, but they warmed as he responded, one hand coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that made her heart ache. When they broke apart, he was looking at her with wonder. You're extraordinary. I'm really not. I'm just a plus-size baker who's apparently very into vampires. He smiled, real and bright. You say that like it's a bad thing. Ask me again after I've met whatever vampire nonsense you have to deal with as king. As if summoned by her words, something crashed downstairs. Casimir was moving before Willa could blink, pushing her behind him as he raced toward the sound. In the family room, they found Serafina and Sebastian frozen by the window, staring out at the lawn where three figures stood. Even from here, Willa could tell they were vampires. They had that same otherworldly quality, that sense of barely contained danger. Stay here, Casimir ordered, his voice hard in a way she'd never heard. Protect the children. He was gone before she could protest, moving too fast for her eyes to track. Through the window, Willa watched him confront the intruders, his body language aggressive. Who are they? She asked the children. Council members, Serafina said, her voice tight. They don't like that father is king. They think he's too weak because he loved a human. Sebastian pressed against Willa's side, trembling. They wanted him to kill us when mother died, said we were abominations. Rage, pure and hot, flooded through Willa, like hell. She was outside before she could think better of it, marching across the frost-covered lawn in her sensible flats and jeans. The vampires turned to look at her, their faces identical masks of contempt. "And what is this?" one of them asked, a woman with white hair piled high on her head. "You keep humans as pets now, Casimir?" "She's none of your concern," Casimir said, trying to position himself between Willa and the visitors. "State your business and leave." "Our business is with you and your half-breed spawn," one of the men said. "The council has voted. They are to be brought before us to answer for their existence." "Over my dead body," Casimir growled. "That can be arranged." Willa stepped forward, ignoring Casimir's hiss of warning. "Let me get this straight. You want to put 2 children on trial for being born?" The woman's eyes narrowed. "You overstep, human. I really don't care. Those kids have done nothing wrong. They're sweet and kind, and they deserve to be protected, not persecuted." "They're unnatural," the third vampire, younger than the others, said. "Their very existence threatens the purity of our bloodlines." "Your bloodlines can go to hell," Willa snapped. "They're children, and if your council has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, incredibly, the woman laughed. "Casimir, where did you find this delightful creature? She has the fire of a vampire in a human body." "She's mine," Casimir said, the possessiveness in his voice sending shivers down Willa's spine. "And she's right. My children are under my protection. Anyone who touches them will answer to me personally." "The council won't accept that." "Then the council can come face me themselves instead of sending lackeys." Casimir's eyes were glowing now. Some vampire power Willa didn't understand making the air around him shimmer. "I am king by blood and right. Challenge me or leave, but you will not touch my family." The 3 vampires exchanged glances. Finally, the woman inclined her head. "We'll relay your message, but Casimir, this isn't over. The council's patience has limits." They disappeared into the shadows, moving with that same impossible speed. The moment they were gone, Casimir rounded on Willa. "What were you thinking?" His hands gripped her shoulders, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to hold her in place. "They could have killed you without a thought. They were threatening your kids. So you decided to confront 3 ancient vampires with nothing but righteous anger? Willa, you could have died. But I didn't." She reached up, framing his face with her hands. "And I'd do it again, because those children are important to me. You're important to me. And I'm not going to stand by while someone threatens what I care about." Casimir made a sound between a laugh and a sob, pulling her into a crushing embrace. "You're going to be the death of me." "You're already dead, so that's not really possible." "Undead," he corrected automatically. "There's a difference." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the pre-dawn light. Finally, Casimir pulled back. "We need to make plans. If the council is moving against the children, we need to be prepared." "What does that mean?" "It means I need to call in favors, shore up alliances, prepare for the possibility of war." He looked exhausted suddenly, the weight of his responsibilities crushing down on him. "This is my world, Willa. Violence and politics and constant power struggles. Are you sure you want any part of it?" Willa thought about walking away, about going back to her simple life of flour and sugar and occasional loneliness. It would be easier, safer. But then she thought about Sebastian's laugh, about Serafina's rare smiles, about the way Casimir looked at her like she was precious, about belonging to something, to people who needed her as much as she needed them. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "Now let's go inside. We have planning to do." The next weeks were a crash course in vampire politics. Casimir introduced her to allies, ancient vampires who owed him favors or shared his more progressive views. Some were kind, curious about the human who'd captured their king's attention. Others were cold, barely tolerating her presence. Willa met them all with the same stubborn grace, refusing to be intimidated. She learned about territorial disputes, about the intricate web of vampire laws, about the council that supposedly governed them all but really just sought to maintain the status quo. She also learned about Casimir's power. He was old, far older than she'd realized, and with age came strength. He could move faster than her eyes could track, had strength that could crush stone, and possessed some kind of psychic ability that let him sense emotions, and, if he chose, influence them. "I'd never use it on you," he assured her when she asked. "It would be a violation of everything you are." "Have you used it before? On other people?" "Yes," he admitted. "In battle or when dealing with enemies. It's a tool like any other. But you could make someone love you. Or fear you." "I could. But anything built on compulsion is hollow. I want—" He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I want you to care for me because you choose to, not because I've manipulated you into it." "I do choose it," Willa said softly. "Every day I choose this. Choose you." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Willa lost herself in the feel of him. They'd been dancing around this for weeks now, the attraction between them growing stronger with each passing day. But Casimir had been holding back, afraid of hurting her, of taking advantage. "I want you," she breathed against his lips. "Is that clear enough?" "Willa, I'm an adult. I know what I'm asking for." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Unless you don't want this." "Not want you?" He laughed, the sound edged with desperation. "I think about you constantly, about touching you, tasting you, making you mine in every way possible. But I'm dangerous. I could hurt you without meaning to. Then we'll be careful. But Casimir, I need you to understand something. I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break. And I'm tired of waiting for someday. I want now." He surrendered with a groan, pulling her close and kissing her like she was air, and he was drowning. His hands roamed her body, reverent and careful, learning every curve. Willa had spent her whole life being self-conscious about her size, about taking up space, but under Casimir's touch, she felt beautiful. Desired, precious. "You're perfect," he murmured against her neck. "Every inch of you is perfect." They made love in his bed, surrounded by shadows and moonlight. He was gentle, almost painfully so, constantly checking that she was okay, that he wasn't hurting her. It was sweet and frustrating and absolutely perfect. Afterward, lying tangled together in silk sheets, Willa traced patterns on his chest. "When this is all over, when the council backs down, what happens then?" "What do you want to happen?" "I want more of this. More nights together, more dinners with the kids. I want to integrate our lives, not just exist in stolen moments." Casimir pressed a kiss to her hair. "I want that too. But Willa, you need to understand what you're asking for. If you stay with me, truly stay, you'll be a target. The council, other vampires who oppose me, they'll see you as a weakness to exploit. So we'll be careful. It's not that simple. Eventually you'll age and I won't. You'll grow old and die, and I'll remain exactly as I am." His voice was raw. "I've already lost one woman I loved. I don't know if I can survive losing another." Willa pushed herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "Is there a way to prevent that?" "You mean turning you?" He looked anguished. "I could, but it's not a gift. Willa, it's a curse. You'd be giving up sunlight, regular food, a normal life, and there's always a chance you wouldn't survive the transformation. But if I did survive, we'd have forever. An eternity watching everyone you know die, watching the world change while you remain frozen. Are you truly willing to give up everything for that?" Willa thought about it, really thought, about her bakery, her love of cooking, the simple pleasure of a sunny day, about the life she'd built for herself, small but hers. Then she thought about losing Casimir, about growing old while he stayed young, about Sebastian and Serafina, who'd be children for decades to come, needing someone to love them. "I'm not saying I want it now," she said carefully. "But someday, if this thing between us is real and lasting, I'd consider it. I'd consider giving up the sun if it meant keeping you." Casimir pulled her down, kissing her fiercely. "You undo me." "Good. You've been wound too tight for too long." They slept as dawn broke, Willa tucked safely in Casimir's arms. For the first time in years, he didn't dream of loss and failure. Instead, he dreamed of possibility. The council's official summons arrived 3 weeks later, delivered by a vampire messenger who looked at Willa with undisguised curiosity. Sebastian and Serafina were to appear before the full council to answer questions about their nature and determine if they posed a threat to vampire society. "This is absurd," Willa said, reading over Casimir's shoulder. "They're 8 years old. What threat could they possibly pose?" "They represent change. The council fears change above all else." Casimir's jaw was tight with anger. "I won't let them do this. I'll challenge the entire council if I have to." "Or," Willa said slowly, an idea forming, "we could give them what they want." "You can't be serious." "Hear me out. They want to evaluate the kids, right? To see if they're dangerous, so let them. Let the council meet Sebastian and Serafina, see how sweet and harmless they are. It's hard to condemn children when you're looking them in the eye. You don't know the council. They're old, set in their ways. They won't see children. They'll see a threat to the established order. Then we make sure they can't ignore the children's humanity." Willa was warming to her plan now. "We bring them to the council meeting, show them off. Let Sebastian charm them with his stories. Let Serafina's intelligence shine through. Make it impossible for them to justify persecution." Casimir looked at her like she'd suggested walking into a dragon's den covered in steak sauce. "It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous, but this way, we're facing it head-on instead of hiding." They argued about it for hours, but eventually, Casimir conceded, mostly because he didn't have a better plan, but also because he was beginning to trust Willa's instincts about people. She saw the best in others, yes, but she was also pragmatic about how to appeal to self-interest. The council meeting was held in a massive underground chamber that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of stone. Vampires filled the space, hundreds of them, all turned to watch as Casimir entered with his children on either side and Willa just behind. The council sat on a raised dais, 7 ancient vampires who looked like they'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting. Their leader, a man who introduced himself as Draven, regarded them with cold eyes. "Casimir Nightwell, you've brought the half-breeds as requested." "I've brought my children," Casimir corrected, his voice hard. "Sebastian and Serafina Nightwell. And I've brought Willa Richardson, the woman who likely saved their lives when I was too lost in grief to see their needs." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Willa felt hundreds of eyes on her, assessing, judging. She lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. "This human is irrelevant to council business," one of the other council members said. "This human is family," Casimir countered, "and she has valuable insight into my children's nature." "Very well," Draven gestured. "Let the children come forward." Willa gave them both an encouraging nod as they walked toward the dais. They looked terrified but determined, holding hands for comfort. "Sebastian and Serafina Nightwell," Draven intoned. "You stand before this council to answer for your existence. You are half-breeds, abominations against vampire purity. What say you in your defense?" Sebastian's lower lip trembled, but it was Serafina who spoke. "We didn't choose to be born, but we're here, and we're not hurting anyone. We just want to live. Your very existence is a corruption of vampire bloodlines." "Why?" Sebastian asked, his voice small but clear. "We're part vampire and part human, but we're not bad. Miss Willa says people are what they choose to be, not what they're born as." "Miss Willa is human. She doesn't understand our ways." "Maybe your ways are wrong," Serafina said, showing the same bravery that had kept her and her brother alive on the streets. "Maybe being different isn't a bad thing." The council members looked taken aback, clearly not expecting such direct challenge from children. Draven leaned forward. "You're bold for half-breeds, but boldness doesn't change what you are." "And what are they exactly?" Willa asked, unable to stay quiet any longer. She moved forward, placing herself slightly in front of the children. "They're smart, kind, resilient kids who've been through more trauma than most people experience in a lifetime. They're survivors. And yes, they're different. But different doesn't mean dangerous. You overstep, human. So I've been told, but I'm going to keep overstepping because someone needs to say this." Willa looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many vampires as she could. "You're all terrified of change, of evolution. These children represent the possibility of a future where vampires and humans coexist peacefully. And that scares you because it would mean your power, your rigid hierarchies, might become obsolete." "How dare you?" one of the council members hissed. I dare because I've got nothing to lose. You can't kill me without making Casimir your enemy. And while you might think you can take him down, I wouldn't bet on it. He's the most powerful vampire I've met, and he'll burn this whole system down to protect his children." Casimir had moved to stand beside her now, his presence a silent support. "She's right. I'll challenge every member of this council if I have to. My children are innocent. If you persecute them for existing, you're the monsters, not them." Silence fell over the chamber. Draven looked at Casimir for a long moment, then at the children, then at Willa. "You've chosen your side, then. The human over your own kind. I've chosen love over fear, family over tradition. If that makes me a traitor, so be it." More silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, one of the other council members spoke up, a woman who looked impossibly old, her white hair falling past her waist. "I've been alive for over 1,000 years, she said quietly. "And in all that time I've watched our kind stagnate. We don't grow, don't change, don't evolve. We just exist, trapped in old patterns and older fears." She looked at the children. "These half-breeds might be exactly what we need. A bridge between our world and theirs." "You can't be serious, Alessandra," Draven said. "I'm absolutely serious. Look at them, Draven. Really look. They're children, innocent children who've done nothing wrong. If we condemn them, what does that make us?" Other voices joined in, some agreeing with Alessandra, others vehemently opposed. The chamber erupted into argument, vampires shouting over each other. Willa pulled the children back, tucking them against her, while Casimir stood guard. Finally, Draven called for order. "Enough. The council will vote. All in favor of allowing the half-breeds to live unmolested?" Willa's heart pounded as hands rose. 4 of the 7 council members voted in favor. It was enough. "The motion carries," Draven said, though he looked displeased. "The half-breeds are under council protection. But know this, Casimir, any future half-breeds will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. This is not blanket approval for mixing bloodlines." "I'll take what I can get," Casimir said. They left the chamber quickly, before anyone could change their minds. Outside, in the cold night air, Serafina and Sebastian threw themselves at Willa, hugging her with desperate strength. "You were so brave," Sebastian said, his voice muffled against her stomach. "You stood up to them even though they're scary." "So were you too. I'm so proud of you both." Casimir pulled all 3 of them into an embrace, his relief palpable. "We did it. We actually did it." "Of course we did," Willa smiled up at him. "We're a family. And families protect each other." The word hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Casimir's eyes softened, and he kissed her there in the parking lot, surrounded by his children, not caring who might see. "A family," he repeated. "Yes, that's exactly what we are." In the months that followed, life settled into a new normal. Willa still ran her bakery during the day, but she spent most evenings at the estate. She taught the children to cook, helped them with their studies, became the mother figure they desperately needed. And she fell deeper in love with Casimir every day. He was attentive and protective, dominant in ways that should have made her bridle but instead made her feel cherished. He'd show up at the bakery right at sunset with flowers, would text her throughout the night to make sure she was okay, would make love to her with a passion that left her breathless and satisfied. But there were hard moments too. Nights when his grief over Isolde would surface and he'd withdraw into himself. Times when vampire politics demanded his attention and he'd be gone for days. Moments when Willa would stand in the sunlight and think about what she'd be giving up if she chose immortality. They talked about it more as their relationship deepened, about what turning would mean, about the reality of forever. "I want you to be sure," Casimir said one night, holding her close. "Not just now, in the heat of love, but really sure. Because once it's done, there's no going back." "I know, and I'm not ready yet. But Casimir, I think someday I will be." She pressed a kiss to his chest. "I want forever with you. I want to be there for Sebastian and Serafina as they grow. I want to build something lasting." "Then we'll wait until you're ready, however long that takes." The turning came not because Willa was ready, but because she had no choice. It happened on a cold January night, 6 months after the council meeting. Willa was closing up the bakery when 3 vampires appeared in her doorway. She recognized one of them, a council member who'd voted against the children. "Can I help you?" she asked, her hand inching toward the phone in her pocket. "You've corrupted our king," the vampire said. "Made him weak. That ends tonight." They moved faster than she could track. Willa tried to fight, tried to scream, but vampire strength was insurmountable. Pain exploded through her body as fangs tore into her throat, not the careful bite of a lover, but the vicious attack of a predator. She was dying. She knew it with absolute certainty. Her blood was pooling on the bakery floor, and her vision was going dark. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was Casimir appearing in a fury of violence, his eyes glowing with rage as he tore into her attackers. Willa woke to agony. Every cell in her body was being ripped apart and rebuilt, her human nature dying to make room for something else. She screamed until her throat was raw, writhing against the hands that held her down. "I've got you," Casimir's voice rough with emotion. "I'm here. I'm so sorry, but I'm here." The turning took 3 days. 3 days of pain unlike anything she'd ever experienced, of fever dreams and hallucinations. But Casimir never left her side, feeding her his blood, talking to her through the worst moments, promising that it would end. When she finally opened her eyes, the world looked different, sharper, more vivid. She could hear Casimir's heart beating, could smell the children sleeping in their rooms down the hall, could sense the sun hidden beyond the horizon. "How do you feel?" Casimir asked, his face haggard with worry. Willa took stock of her new body. Everything felt stronger, more alive despite being technically dead. "Different, but okay, I think. I had to turn you. You were dying, and I couldn't lose you." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I know you weren't ready, but I couldn't let you go." "Hey." She cupped his face, marveling at how clearly she could see him now, every detail of his beloved features. "You saved my life. I'm not angry. You should be. I took your choice away. You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. And Casimir?" She smiled, feeling her new fangs with her tongue. "I would have said yes eventually anyway. This just moved up the timeline." Relief flooded his expression. He kissed her desperately, and Willa tasted him with her new senses, the experience overwhelming and perfect. "The vampires who attacked you are dead," he said when they broke apart. "I made sure of that, and the council member who ordered it is being brought before the full council to answer for breaking vampire law." "Vampire law? Killing another vampire's mate is one of our most serious crimes. They'll execute him." "Mate." The word sent warmth through her chest. "Is that what I am? Your mate?" "If you'll have me, for eternity." That sounds pretty good, actually. They spent the next weeks helping Willa adjust to her new nature. She learned to control her strength, to hunt ethically, to navigate the vampire world as one of them instead of an outsider. It was challenging, and she mourned the loss of some human experiences, but she didn't regret it. She couldn't run the bakery anymore, not during the day, but she hired a manager and staff to keep it going. Sweet Haven became a night bakery too, open until dawn for the growing number of vampires who'd heard about the Vampire King's mate and her incredible pastries. Sebastian and Serafina were overjoyed when they learned Willa would be staying forever. They'd been terrified of losing another mother, and having her permanently in their lives was a gift beyond measure. "Does this mean you're married to Father now?" Sebastian asked one evening, looking up from the cookies he was decorating. Willa and Casimir exchanged glances. They'd been so focused on surviving, on adjusting to her new nature, that they hadn't really discussed the formalities. "Not yet," Casimir said slowly, "but I hope to change that." He turned to Willa, and her breath caught at the love in his eyes. "Marry me. Let me spend eternity showing you how precious you are." "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard," Willa said, but she was smiling. "But yes, obviously yes." The wedding was held in the spring, a small ceremony with just family and close allies. Willa wore a dress the color of cream, and Casimir looked at her like she was the son he'd given up. Sebastian and Serafina stood with them, part of the ceremony, because they were the reason Willa and Casimir had found each other in the first place. As they exchanged vows, promising eternity to each other, Willa thought about how far she'd come. From a lonely baker feeding 2 hungry children to this, a family, a purpose, a love that would outlast centuries. "I love you," she whispered as Casimir slipped the ring on her finger. "I love you more than I thought possible," he replied. "Thank you for saving us. You saved me first." Their kiss was witnessed by vampires and a few trusted humans, by children who'd finally found stability, by friends who'd fought alongside them. And in that moment, surrounded by love and possibility, Willa knew she'd made the right choice. Being human had been good, but being Casimir's wife, Sebastian and Serafina's mother, a member of this strange and wonderful family, that was extraordinary. Years passed, then decades. The world changed around them, but their family remained constant. Sebastian and Serafina grew slowly, aging at half the rate of normal children, and Willa was there for every milestone. She taught them to bake, to find joy in small things, to be kind even in a world that wasn't always kind to them. Casimir ruled his territory with Willa at his side, and together they pushed for reforms. More protections for half-breeds, better relations with humans, an end to the most archaic vampire laws. It wasn't easy, and they made enemies, but they also inspired others. Slowly, the vampire world began to change. The bakery thrived, becoming a neutral meeting ground where vampires and humans could coexist peacefully. Willa still made her cinnamon rolls, still decorated cakes with the same care she always had. But now, she did it surrounded by family, by love, by purpose. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Casimir found her in their private garden, watching the moon rise. "Any regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Willa leaned into him, marveling that even after all this time, his touch still made her heart race. "Not a single one. You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." She turned in his embrace, kissing him with all the love and passion that 5 decades together had only strengthened. "We have eternity now. That's more than enough. It's everything." Inside the house, they could hear Sebastian and Serafina, now young adults, arguing over something trivial. Could hear the sounds of the staff preparing for the anniversary party. Could feel the warmth of their community, their found family, their home. Willa had spent her human life searching for belonging, for a place where she mattered. She'd found it in the most unexpected way. By feeding 2 starving children on a cold October evening, everything after that had been inevitable. The falling in love, the turning, the family they'd built together. Looking back, she couldn't imagine any other path, any other life. "Come on," she said, taking Casimir's hand. "Our children are waiting, and I believe there's cake." "You and your cakes," he said fondly. "You love my cakes. I love you. I love you too, for eternity." They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready to celebrate another year of forever. The bakery that had brought them together was thriving. The children who'd connected them were grown and happy. The love they'd found was stronger than ever. It wasn't a perfect life. There were still challenges, still moments of grief and difficulty, but it was their life, built on love and trust and the simple act of feeding the hungry. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The twins who'd once pressed their faces against a bakery window, starving and desperate, were now thriving young adults with the world before them. The vampire king who'd been drowning in grief had found joy again. And the plus-size baker who'd only wanted to make people smile with her pastries had found a family worth living forever for. Willa Richardson had fed 2 starving children not knowing their father was the vampire king. In doing so, she'd saved them all, including herself. It was a story they'd tell for generations, how kindness had bridged 2 worlds, how love had conquered fear, how a simple act of compassion had changed everything. As the anniversary party filled the house with laughter and love, as Casimir pulled her into a dance and Sebastian and Serafina joined them, Willa felt complete. This was her eternity. This beautiful, chaotic, perfect eternity. And she wouldn't trade it for anything in any world.